now it's one that triggered our internal kind of momentum detector this week. We have these thresholds set for any time we start to see consumer chatter, peak, whether it's overall buzz, whether it's purchase intent, or whether it's happiness. And we really saw a large happiness surge and also a large demand surge just over the last week and really over the last month. And whenever we looked, it's interesting because what we see is that Spotify is doing a really good job of leveraging some new AI tools. So I know AI is a big buzzword. It's one of the largest trends that we're tracking this year in the LikeFolio universe. It's got a ton of attention just after the release of ChatGPT. But Spotify is a company that's actually leveraging this technology in a meaningful way for consumers. And what it did over this last week is it started unrolling a new feature, this Spotify DJ. I don't know if you guys have used it personally. I've started using it. But what it does is it provides personalized listening recommendations. So essentially, you can turn this DJ on and you can listen based on your past music preferences and things like that. But what this does is it kind of provides an extra value proposition for Spotify for consumers. So now not only on Spotify can you direct your listening preferences in a really user-involved way, but now you can kind of sit back and just listen if you don't want to be the one driving, if you don't want to have to queue up songs, if you're sick of your playlist, you can kind of rely on this new tool to serve you up music that you like. And so for us, we saw this drive demand volume, so consumer mentions of signing up for and listening to Spotify pretty significantly over the last week. You could see that bump on the chart before in terms of that year-over-year purchase intent change. But also from a happiness perspective, just to give scale, alongside this surge, we've seen a 14-point increase in consumer happiness levels on a year-over-year basis. So for us, anytime we see a demand surge and then we also see pretty significant happiness improvements, for us, that's a really good sign of positive consumer momentum.
Megan, this is a premium product, correct? It's not something that you get from the free download?
Yes.
So do you see this maybe pushing the needle a little bit to get those people that were kind of on the fence using the free service to move over to that premium membership? And does that help expand margins for the company going forward?
Yeah, I think that this is critical. This is one of the biggest things that investors are looking at for Spotify is, how can it improve its operating losses? How can it make steps to improve this revenue growth even? And a lot of that has to do with this premium subscriber models. It's growing its monthly active user base, but I think that whenever you look at the total number of premium subscribers, it's significantly less. You've got 205 million paid subscribers versus 489 million monthly active users. So there's definitely a lot of room here for growth, but it's really positive because in our universe, consumer happiness is really leading. This is the metric that we look for when we look for, continued growth and continued expansion and also pricing power. And so whenever we see a large surge in consumer happiness, something like 14 points, that's a really positive sign that Spotify is effectively leveraging and providing value to its consumers, and thus hopefully is more likely to increase that premium subscriber base, that paying base. Because right now, when you look at what's driving revenue, that is those subscribers. I think that its revenue around 14% is driven by advertising. So there's a case to be made that improved advertising market could also help improve its revenue growth, but also just driving these premium subscribers is critical too.
Yeah, Megan, and they made a big deal, when podcasting was, the big thing about a couple of years ago. They signed up, a few people there. But at the same time, it seems like they just reworked their podcasting segment of their business. Are you seeing any downturn in that data for Spotify?
So on a year-over-year basis, I will say just overall mentions of consumers who are listening to podcasts has tempered some. We've seen that pull back from, those COVID highs of when really Spotify was going all in on this segment. But whenever you look at the consumers who are really engaged with podcasting, who are talking about listening, we track a lot of different peers, whether it's Apple Music, whether it's SoundCloud, whether it's iHeartRadio. We have lots of different podcasting mentions, and Spotify accounts for about 70% of all of those podcast podcast listening mentions. So it's definitely the dominant player, at least in our data, and it's holding this position pretty well too. So I think that this is an area of future growth. This is definitely what's driving their advertising growth. I think advertising revenue increased by 14% last quarter, and this is an area where Spotify is still specializing. And honestly, as advertising continues to, or if it improves, I think that this is, a likely beneficiary because of its strong podcasting position.
All right, great stuff. Megan, real quick, they don't have earnings until like the 25th of April. Do you guys have an earnings score on this based on the data that you guys are seeing?
So when we look at earnings right now, our score is neutral. So we think that this past rally is justified, but we'll be watching moving forward to see if this spike in especially consumer happiness is leading from a demand perspective. Just over the last week and really over the last month, we can see improvements, but we want to see continued improvements, especially ahead of the next earnings event. So we're neutral for now, but our longer term outlook is more bullish.
Well, my happiness is expanding. I love that Spotify, so I use it all the time. Good stuff as always, Megan. Appreciate all the data.
Thanks, guys.
All right, have a great weekend. That's Megan.